Good morning. Please stand for the presentation of the colors and the national anthem.
Mark time. Up. Group. Halt. Left. Face. Present. Arms.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the
Order. Arms. Post. Colors. Right. Face. Forward. March.
Please be seated. Welcome, everyone. We have gathered here today for this Memorial Day Assembly to recognize faculty, staff, and alumni in our community who have served our country. I am pleased to welcome our alumni and other guests who have joined us today. This morning, before we introduce our guest speaker and pay tribute to our fallen heroes, will all of the faculty, staff, alumni, and other guests in the audience who have served in this country's military please stand to be recognized. Thank you. We are deeply grateful for your service. Our guest speaker today is Colonel Matthew R. Brooks, St. Louis Country Day class of 1992. Colonel Brooks, could you please join me at the podium? After graduation from CDS, Colonel Brooks attended the United States Air Force Academy, where he was a letterman on the football team. After graduating from the academy and receiving his commission in 1996, Colonel Brooks attended pilot training, earning his wings in 1998. Trained as a bomber pilot with qualification in the B-1 Lancer, B-2 Sprit, and B-52 Stratofortress, Colonel Brooks has served multiple overseas tours of duty, flying combat missions over Iraq and Afghanistan in the decade following the 9/11 terrorist attacks. In addition to his operating service, Colonel Brooks has served at the Pentagon, United States Central Command Headquarters, and represented the United States as a Defense Fellow at the Geneva Center for Security Policy in Switzerland. Currently, he serves as the commander of the 5th Bomb Wing at Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota, where he is responsible for over 5,000 airmen who operate and maintain the wing's fleet of B-52 bombers. He and his wife, Deborah, who is also with us today, have 2 children. Please welcome Colonel Matthew Brooks.
Well, good morning. It's truly an honor for me to be here as we gather to remember the fallen at our annual Memorial Day Assembly. Before I begin, just a word of thanks to Ms. Lisa Lyle, Scott Small, and Ms. Louise Jones for the invitation to be here today. Certainly, I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize Mr. T. Bauer, class of 1964, who was a catalyst for getting me here last year at the reunion, invited me back. And sir, thank you again for the invitation and for all that you've done to support this Memorial Day remembrance. Certainly, Coach Holtman, a former Marine, great to see you, Coach, and all the other veterans in attendance today. It's an honor for me to be here. Special thanks to the rest of the team who put this event on. The color guard was excellent, and of course, the national anthem makes the ceremony sacred. Since the inception of our great nation, 1.3 million brave patriots have given their lives in service to our United States of America, to include 33 alumni, faculty, and staff from MICDS. Each year on Memorial Day, we gather to honor their sacrifice and mourn their loss, assuring that they will not be forgotten. From the shots fired at Lexington and Concord to the battlefields of the Middle East today, our service members selflessly put their lives on the line, and many gave the ultimate sacrifice to defend our way of life. For some of you here today, you've known someone who answered the call to service and made that sacrifice. Today we honor a long line of patriots from many generations of Americans, men and women who have exhibited such great courage and selflessness. Many died in battle, others died later from their wounds sustained in combat, and many still succumbed to service-connected injuries many years after their service. At home and abroad, the men and women who volunteered to serve in the military continued this tradition of placing their lives on the line to defend our United States. They display our country's best traditions under circumstances both difficult and complex. It's one way of honoring those who have made the ultimate sacrifice. I'm just one of the more than 300,000 active duty Air Force airmen serving around the globe today. The airmen I have the honor of serving alongside carry on the traditions of honor, dedication, and patriotism that their predecessors laid down for them. Today, less than 1% of Americans serve in our armed forces. While Memorial Day is not about the living, I'd like to briefly share my story of service with the hope of passing along a better understanding of those who defend the United States, keeping her safe every day. In the fall of 1991, after a crushing loss to Priory in a football game, my telephone rang. And on the other end of the line was a football coach from the Air Force Academy who asked if I would be interested in attending. To be candid, I knew absolutely nothing about the military, but one of the many great things about MICDS is that I learned the value of service here. And attending the Air Force Academy was a life-changing opportunity for me. After graduation, I attended pilot training and began my service as a pilot of the B-1 bomber, pictured here. While flying the B-1 was truly incredible, the world of the late 1990s was reasonably stable, and all of my flying was spent training for the day we thought and hoped would never come. That all changed on September 11th, 2001. Around 8 o'clock in the morning, I took off in my B-1 bomber on a routine training mission. And just after 9 o'clock, while I was still airborne, it became very clear as we heard radio chatter from other pilots in air traffic control that the world we knew had changed forever. America was under attack. After landing back at our base in Texas and seeing the news for the first time, we all knew that we would soon be called upon to deploy overseas to take the fight to our nation's enemies. In January 2002, my squadron was deployed to the Middle East, tasked with flying combat missions over the skies of Afghanistan against al-Qaeda and Taliban forces. We affectionately called this Tent City, and it would be our home for the next 4 months. Pictured here is my flight crew. A crew on the B-1 consists of 2 pilots who fly the aircraft and 2 weapons systems officers who are responsible for the navigation and also serve as bombardiers. My flight crew flew nearly every mission together for our entire 4-month deployment, and we got to know each other quite well. On a typical day, we would take off on our B-1 from our base in the Middle East with a full load of bombs on the aircraft. Pictured here are 2,000-pound GPS-guided weapons, and if you look closely, you'll notice the stickers on the weapons from the Fire Department of New York and the New York Police Department. We were very mindful of those who had given so much during and after the 9/11 attacks. A few hours into the flight, we would rejoin with an air refueling tanker en route to Afghanistan, like the one pictured here, in order to take enough fuel to stay aloft for our combat missions that would last routinely over 12 hours. We would fly our aircraft up to about 15 feet behind the refueling aircraft and connect with the receptacle that extended from the back of the plane. After refueling once over Afghanistan, we would check in with a joint terminal air controller on the ground who would provide us with a situation update and direct us to bomb our targets. This is what it looked like from the ground. The events I just described took place in 2002, and it's worth mentioning today that the conflict endures. This photo is from 10 years later when I had the honor of commanding that same squadron in combat. We should never forget that even today, brave men and women, like the ones pictured here, stand at the ready, defending our country and our way of life. As I have already mentioned, however, today's assembly is not about the living. Memorial Day is about remembering those who have given the ultimate sacrifice, serving our nation. President Franklin Roosevelt said, "Those who have long enjoyed such privileges as we enjoy forget in time that men have died to win them." Today, I'd like to introduce you to one such man, Captain Lance P. Sijon, an Air Force Academy graduate who was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor, our nation's highest award for valor against an enemy force which can be bestowed upon an individual serving in our armed forces of the United States.
This is not your typical love story. Picture a skeleton of a man, alone. A skeleton with bits of ragged skin and muscle and a heart that somehow won't stop beating. Captain Lance P. Sijon, ejected from his fighter jet over Laos, November 1967. 46 days and nights with no food, crawling along inch by inch, trying to pull himself home out of hell. A shattered hand, cracked in half, fingers folded back and tied down with filthy strips of what used to be this airman's flight suit. One leg busted with a double compound fracture and the bone snapped off sharp. Dragging himself along the jungle floor, the flesh rubbed off, his body scraping over the limestone and tree roots. As he passes in and out of consciousness, he tries to measure time by the length of his beard and his mad hair. Like I said, this is not your typical love story. Lance P. Sijon was unrecognizable. He was 80 pounds and close to death, and he was a million miles away from giving up. He'd been a 220-pound football player at the Air Force Academy. He was a pilot. He was a leader. He lifted others up, but he didn't tolerate fools or slackers. He loved art, and he sang the lead in the high school musical The King. He was a good-looking guy and drove a sweet Corvette. He was a Boy Scout. He was a son. And he was a brother. He was ejected from his aircraft after an ordnance explosion over Laos. 46 days. He waved off the rescue because he didn't want to risk getting anyone else hurt. On Christmas morning, 1967, barely alive, he was captured by the Viet Cong and taken to an interrogation camp. Emaciated, hardly breathing, he still managed to overpower a guard and escape, but was recaptured and tortured for 9 days. The other American prisoners could hear his screams. Sijon gave him nothing. The reason Lance had room for pain was because he made no room for hate. Make no mistake, Lance Saigon had no love in his heart for his captors. He threatened to break their necks even when he was too weak to swallow food or lift his head. He believed in freedom. He believed in his fellow airmen. There's a difference between faith and hope. Hope is something you cling to. Faith is something strong as nails you can carry in battle. Faith is believing with all you've got. Lance never gave up believing they would escape. His love of country and of his airmen was immeasurable and unbroken right up to the end. He died January 22nd, 1968. He received the Medal of Honor for evading capture, for heroism above and beyond the call of duty, for living the code of conduct to his last breath. A man's character is revealed in the actions he takes when he knows no one is watching. A man's soul is revealed in the actions he takes when he knows no one is coming. Don't think of this as a horror story of survival that we can't imagine. Think of the things we all share with Lance Saigon, the things we fight for. If he could do what he did, Airman, you can do whatever is in front of you. You are never alone. Because Lance P. Saigon left us a legacy of love and leadership. Love of country leads to duty. Love of your fellow airmen leads to loyalty. Love of freedom leads to honor. Love of family leads you home. Aim high, airmen.
While I was never fortunate enough to know Lance Saigon, I've had the honor of getting to know Colonel Retired Lee Ellis, who was Captain Saigon's dorm mate and golfing buddy when they were both training to become Air Force pilots before the Vietnam War. Later, Colonel Ellis himself spent over 5 years in captivity in the Hanoi area as a prisoner of war during Vietnam. I'd like to close today with remarks that Colonel Ellis made about Memorial Day. And I quote, "During the Vietnam War, I lost 3 very close friends from the days of training and deployment and several others from high school and college days. They were all great guys and brave warriors. Like most all who go to war and come back alive, I often reflect on this loss, how I came back and my buddies didn't. There is no way to understand how God's providence works, and most warriors who have lost mates understand this type of guilt. Those of us who made it back carry on with our lives, moving through the seasons of life, but there is always a sad and empty place in our hearts as we recall our lost friends. As we consider a day of memorial, it's a good time to reflect on how we can pay tribute to them. If they could speak to us, I think they would say, honor us when you pause in the rhythms of life to remember our sacrifice and the loss to our families. Go out and give your own sacrifice by putting service to others and country ahead of self. You will honor us by living and leading with honor." Thank you.
Colonel Brooks, thanks for your message, thank you for your service, and thank you for coming back as a remarkable alum and sharing your story with us all. Now you will hear from our 2 upper school student council leaders, Ollie Reeb and Jamerson Durrill.
Please stand as we read the names of alumni and faculty veterans killed in service to our country. Yeoman John Dwight Bridge.
Captain Henri Chouteau, Jr.
Lieutenant Rene Auguste Chouteau.
Corporal Judson B. Conant.
First Lieutenant Grant R. Ellis.
Colonel John Ryson Fordyce, Jr.
Captain John D. Franciscus.
First Lieutenant James Everett Frazier.
Ensign George B. Gannett, Jr.
Lieutenant Edward Chase Garvey.
Captain Michael P. Getlin.
Cadet Scott Pope Hawkins.
Private First Class John Francis Hennessy III.
Lieutenant Alfred H. Herman II.
Corporal Waldo Clark Jackman, Jr.
Corporal Carl S. Lawton, Jr.
Staff Sergeant Donald C. McCord, Jr.
Second Lieutenant Stratford Lee Morton, Jr.
Lieutenant Edward T. Nolan, Jr.
Lieutenant Donald Alfred Unk.
Lieutenant Walter Lewis Pfeffer, Jr.
Private First Class Christopher Podmuniski.
Second Lieutenant James A. Seven.
Corporal Willard B. Shelp III.
Corporal David R. Small.
First Lieutenant Edwin T. Stannard, Jr.
Lieutenant Howard V. Stevens, Jr.
Lieutenant George S. Tiffany, Jr.
Private First Class Harry G. Wells.
Lieutenant Stannard T. Wheaton.
Captain Elmer C. Wirtz, Jr.
Lieutenant David P. Wool, Jr.
And First Lieutenant James Chandler Wood. We will now observe a moment of silence.
Will the color guard please retire the colors?
Mark time. Mark. Group. Halt. Left. Face. Retreat. Colors.